So good morning, everyone. So as usual, we'll start with some prayers, then a little meditation on something we looked at last week. And while reciting the prayers, if you can, imagine the Buddha in the space in front of you. You can imagine all the objects of refuge that if you're able to do that, but at least visualize the Buddha, and you can imagine he embodies all the other objects of refuge. The Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, all the holy beings, all the spiritual teachers, past and present. So all these objects we rely on to learn the Dharma and make it alive in our lives. And also think that we're here doing these prayers and then listening to teachings, not just for our own benefit. Of course, we will benefit, but open your heart to all other living beings. They want to be happy just as we do. They want to avoid suffering just as we do. And we can help them by increasing our understanding and our experience of the Dharma. So feel that that is your motivation for being here.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When O supreme among humans you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, for that sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Edam Guru Rana Mandala Kam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few moments to settle your mind and body in the present, right here, right now. So last week we started looking at the great scope, and this is the third and last main section of the Lamrim, and it has to do with developing bodhicitta and following the bodhisattva's path to full enlightenment, Buddhahood. And the first point in this section is how bodhicitta is the only gateway to the Mahayana. So the Buddha taught lots of different things that we can learn about and reflect on and meditate on and get good at, become accomplished. For example, the four truths of Aryas, ethical conduct, concentration, wisdom, understanding the true nature of everything, immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, and so on. So is it the case that everyone who has learned and practiced these things and became proficient at them is on the Mahayana path? So the answer is no. Only someone who has uncontrived bodhicitta, the naturally arising aspiration to become a Buddha for the sake of all living beings, only someone who has that in their mind is actually on the Mahayana path, the path leading to full enlightenment. So what's the significance of that? Mahayana is like a plane or a spaceship that can take us to Buddhahood and attain all the amazing qualities and abilities that a Buddha has. Only a Buddha has, like omniscient mind, seeing all phenomena exactly as they are without any mistake, and incredible abilities to be able to help each and every sentient being according to their respective abilities and inclinations and so on. And immeasurable great compassion and love dedicated to helping each and every sentient being without excluding anyone until every single being has reached enlightenment as well. So those are just some of the amazing qualities that a Buddha has. And the Mahayana is the path leading to that, the spaceship that can take us to that state. But to be able to travel on this plane or spaceship, we have to have a ticket. And that ticket is bodhicitta. It doesn't cost anything. In fact, you can't buy it even if you have billions of dollars. But we can develop bodhicitta in our mind. There are methods for doing so. So see if you can see the value of that, the importance of that, and feel inspired to do so. And we may find it difficult to believe that we can develop bodhicitta. We might look at our mind and see there's a lot of selfishness, self-centeredness, and a lot of afflictions like anger and attachment, jealousy, and so on. But remember, the mind can be changed. It's not fixed the way it is. Bodhicitta is something that can be developed if we learn the methods and practice them. And we're really fortunate that we have the chance to learn these methods for developing bodhicitta. And we have a really ideal situation here in the Abbey to work on them, to cultivate them. So as your motivation for participating in this class, learning these incredible teachings by the great accomplished scholar and yogi Lama Tsongkhapa, have the aspiration to do your best to develop bodhicitta and follow the path to Buddhahood in order to benefit all other sentient beings. So we were at the bottom of page 192, just towards the end of this section on how bodhicitta is the only gateway to the Mahayana. And there was this discussion about how there's like two really important qualities we need to develop. There's the wisdom, realizing selflessness, and also bodhicitta. And the wisdom realizing selflessness is compared to a mother, because in some cultures like ancient India and also in Tibet, the ethnicity or the caste of a child is determined by the father. So the child takes on the caste or ethnic group of the father. And so if a woman has several children with different fathers of different castes, then the children are the caste of the father rather than that of the mother. So the mother is said to be the common cause, and the father is the uncommon or unique cause. And it's similar with the three types of followers in Buddhism: the hearers, solitary realizers, and the bodhisattvas. So all of them have to develop the wisdom that directly realizes selflessness. So that's like the common cause, what they all have in common. But then on the method side of the path, not the wisdom side, but the method side of the path, they have their own uncommon causes. And so for hearers and solitary realizers, it would be renunciation, the determination to be free of samsara. And for the bodhisattvas, it's bodhicitta. So that's the unique thing that determines if one is a bodhisattva and following the Mahayana path. So yeah, there's this analogy both in Sutra and Tantra that the male represents method and female represents wisdom. And I think some people have interpreted that to mean that women have more wisdom than men. I wouldn't argue with that, but I don't think that's the significance. So I think that's, not the significance of that symbolism. So it's probably this reason here. We can't make generalizations anyway. There's individual beings have their own characteristics. Okay, so we'll begin with the very last paragraph of 192. It says, that is why the perfection of wisdom is also known as the mother, since it is the mother of the sons and daughters of both the Mahayana and the Hinayana. It is not the wisdom realizing emptiness that differentiates the Mahayana and the Hinayana. Rather, bodhicitta and vast conduct differentiate them. So the Mahayana, those following the Mahayana path generate bodhicitta and also vast conduct, in the sense that they engage in the six perfections, accumulate a vast amount of merit to reach their goal of full enlightenment. So that is not the case with the hearers and solitary realizers. In Precious Garland by Nagarjuna, they are also taught to be differentiated not by view but by conduct. The Shravaka vehicle does not explain the Bodhisattva's aspiration, conduct, or complete dedications. How could they become Bodhisattvas? So I haven't studied all the scriptures of the hearer vehicle, but it seems that, in those scriptures you don't have a complete explanation of how to develop bodhicitta, how to follow the bodhisattva's path. I'm sure there's some aspects of the bodhisattva's path that are explained, but not in a complete way. I think that's what Nagarjuna is saying. Therefore, if even the wisdom realizing emptiness is not a path unique to the Mahayana, what need is there to mention other paths? Okay, so other kinds of practices like ethical conduct, concentration, and so on. So those are not unique to Mahayana, they're common to both Mahayana and the other two paths. So it's mainly bodhicitta that differentiates the two. For that reason, it is necessary to train in bodhicitta, having made instructions on it one's main concern. Any questions about that section before we move on? Okay. Then, now we look at the actual way to generate the mind of bodhicitta, and that has 3 points. We can put the slides, put the outline, because kind of a lot of little points in the outline. Okay, so 3 points. The stages of training in bodhicitta, the measure of it having arisen, and the way to adopt it by means of a ritual. So first, the stages of training in bodhicitta. This has 2 variations. The sevenfold cause and effect instruction transmitted from Atisha, and the training based on texts by the Bodhisattva Shantideva. So there's 2 main ways to develop bodhicitta. So we start with the first, the sevenfold instruction transmitted from Atisha. So I think it has its origins in, of course, the Buddhist teachings, and then treatises by the Indian masters, probably Sangha especially, and then it was brought to Tibet by Atisha. Okay, so next page, chapter 15. The sevenfold cause and effect instruction transmitted from Atisha. So the sevenfold cause and effect instruction is this. A complete Buddha is born from bodhicitta. This mind from the extraordinary attitude, this attitude from compassion, compassion from love, love from the wish to repay the kindness, the wish to repay the kindness from remembering the kindness, and remembering the kindness from seeing beings as one's mother. So that's going backwards, the reverse order. And normally we learn them and meditate on them in the opposite order, starting with seeing all beings as our mother. So there are 2 points: generating certainty concerning the stages and the actual gradual training. So generating certainty has 2 points. The way compassion is the root of the Mahayana, and the way the other causes and effects become causes and effects of that compassion. Yeah. So the sevenfold, it's called sevenfold cause and effect instruction. And so there's 7 points that you meditate on. And in my own experience, I learned that why they're called cause and effect instructions is because the first 6 causes, the first 6 points that you meditate on are all causes for the 7th point, which is bodhicitta, the culmination. So by meditating on the first 6 steps, the result that you will have is bodhicitta. So I think that's a common way of explaining, and a kind of a simple way of explaining. However, Lama Tsongkhapa has another way of explaining the cause and effect sequence, which will be coming in the next few pages. Okay, so the way compassion is the root of the Mahayana has 3 points. I think I put them on the next slide. Yeah, the way compassion is the root of the Mahayana has 3 points. The importance of compassion at the beginning, and then the importance of compassion in the middle, and the importance of compassion at the end. Okay, so compassion is important, both at the beginning of our practice, in the middle, along the way, and at the end. So first, the importance of compassion at the beginning. If your mind is moved by great compassion, you will certainly resolve to free sentient beings from cyclic existence. However, if your compassion is inferior, such deeds will not come about. So great compassion means having compassion for all sentient beings without exception, not excluding anyone, even people who do terrible things, create huge amounts of suffering for others. So even they deserve our compassion. So it's of course not easy, not easy to have compassion for every single sentient being, but it is possible. And if we work on it, we can gradually increase our compassion and have it for more and more and more beings. And so that's great compassion. But great compassion is also more than just that. It isn't just having compassion for all sentient beings, wishing all sentient beings to be free of suffering. But when it's called great compassion means you take on the responsibility to do that yourself. You feel, I am going to do it. I am going to do whatever it takes to make sure that sentient beings are free of suffering. So it isn't just kind of passively thinking, oh, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering. I mean, of course, that's great. That's wonderful to feel that way. But you go further than that, and you actually, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sure that happens. I'm going to do whatever it takes. That's great compassion. And that's what someone who wants to become a Buddha needs to develop. So if we don't have such great compassion, then our deeds, activities to help sentient beings will not happen. Therefore, whether you take responsibility for liberating all beings without exception depends on that compassion. And if you do not take that responsibility, you do not enter the Mahayana. So it's said that the hearers and the solitary realizers develop compassion too. And in fact, they have compassion for all living beings, immeasurable compassion. But they don't have that great compassion. They don't make that further step of saying, I will take responsibility to make sure all sentient beings become free of all their suffering. I'm going to do that myself. So that's what we need to actually enter the Mahayana. Mm-hmm.
So if great compassion is the one that makes the resolve to free sentient beings, then what is altruism? What's the difference between the two, great compassion and altruism?
What do you mean by altruism?
The wish to do that.
Well, we're going to come to that later. So let's hang on to that question later. That when we go through the actual stages, then we'll look at that. Okay?
Because you said that great compassion includes that resolve.
Yeah, it does. It takes on it. You take on that responsibility. So let's leave that until we get to the actual stages, because maybe some of the people here haven't gone through the actual stages. It's clarified in the book In Praise of Great Compassion. I think Volume 5 is a good explanation of it in there. Okay, that is why compassion is important at the beginning. The teachings of Akshayamati Sutra says, Venerable Shardavati Putra, the great compassion of the Bodhisattvas is inexhaustible. Why is that? It is because it is a preliminary. The other book, the Lamrim Chenmo, translated that as prerequisite. That's, I think, a good term. It's like a necessary step. Venerable Sravasti, it is like this. By way of analogy, just as the inward and outward flow of the breath is a preliminary for our human life force faculty, likewise, the great compassion of the Bodhisattva is a preliminary for perfectly accomplishing the Mahayana. So it's like the breath, like our breath, right? We need breath to be able to be alive, to survive. And so in a similar way, great compassion is, an essential step for perfectly accomplishing the Mahayana. Another sutra called the Gaya Shirsha Hill Sutra says, Manjushri, what initiates the conduct of bodhisattvas? What is its object? Manjushri replied, Divine child, what initiates the conduct of bodhisattvas is great compassion. Its object is sentient beings. So those are sutra quotations to validate this statement that great compassion is needed for the bodhisattvas. And then in the middle, the importance of compassion in the middle means while you're on your way, you have to continue having great compassion. Although you enter the Mahayana when a mind like this has arisen once, when you see the great number and the bad actions of sentient beings and the great difficulty, boundlessness, and limitless time required of the trainings, you may become discouraged and fall into the Hinayana. Yeah, so it's easy to think, oh yeah, Buddhahood, enlightenment, that's great, that's just what I want to do, and get all enthusiastic. But then the more you learn about what is actually involved in attaining enlightenment and helping all sentient beings, it's harder than training for the Olympics. Zillions of times harder than that. So yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of time to be able to attain that state of Buddhahood. So it's possible that you might think, no, that's too hard. And then you give up and decide to follow the path to your own liberation. However, by familiarizing yourself increasingly with great compassion, rather than generating it just once, you will become unconcerned with your own happiness and suffering and will not despair over the welfare of others, whereby you will easily complete all the accumulations. So we need to continue meditating on great compassion, keeping it alive and increasing it all along the path, just to make sure we don't give up, but we keep going. Although it is said, what I think of is the first ground, the Bodhisattva's first ground, which is called the very joyful. So that's the point at which they have directly realized emptiness, and they experience nothing but joy all the time, no matter what kind of difficulties they go through. Even if they're in hell, they don't suffer. They're joyful. So I think from that time on, it's probably a breeze. But the first two paths, path of accumulation and path of preparation, it's probably, maybe more difficult, more challenging. You really have to make sure. Although it is said that each of those two paths has stages. And the first path, the path of accumulation, that's when you become a bodhisattva. You have uncontrived bodhicitta. That has 3 levels, called small, middle, and great. And on the small level, that's like the first stage of the path of accumulation. It's still possible to lose bodhicitta. It's still possible to fall back. But from the middle level of the path of accumulation on, you will never lose your bodhicitta. So you're definitely on the path and you won't fall back. So it's just really that first stage. Although that could last a long time. If you're following the sutra path, you might be on that stage for many lifetimes while you're accumulating enough merit to continue further. So it's really only at that first stage of the path that there's this danger, it's like you just made it, but you're still kind of a little, shaky, and you might fall back before you get really definite to continue. But anyway, so it just shows that a bodhisattva needs to continue meditating on and keeping alive their great compassion. And then at the end, meaning Buddhahood, so even when the Buddhas have achieved their result, they do not dwell in peace like the Hinayanists, but bring about the welfare of however many sentient beings there are throughout space. This is also due to the power of great compassion, for without it, they would become like Shravakas. And so even at the end, meaning you've reached the goal you're aiming for, you have become a Buddha, but you still have to maintain great compassion. Not that that would be any problem, it's just like impossible to be a Buddha and not have great compassion. But it's just pointing out that, even at the end of the path, even when you've reached your goal and you're a Buddha, you still have great compassion to continue working for the sake of all sentient beings. And even the most difficult sentient beings who are really angry and hostile and don't want to be a good person and don't want to be enlightened, you just keep working for them, however long it takes, with great compassion and patience and so on. Otherwise, Buddha would just go into the state of peaceful bliss, enjoying the bliss of enlightenment, not working for others. And then Chandrakirti, here's those verses that are at the beginning of Chandrakirti's text, entering the middle way, about great compassion. So glorious Chandrakirti, in entering the middle way, said that for a harvest, what is important in the beginning is the seed, in the middle, the water, and in the end, its ripening. Likewise, for the harvest of Buddhahood, what is important in the beginning, the end, and the middle is compassion. So it looked funny when I first saw that he said beginning, end, and middle, but it does say that in the Tibetan. So I don't know, for some reason Lama Tsongkhapa reversed those. But anyway, the point is just to verify that compassion is important in the beginning, and the middle, and the end, is referring to that quote from Chandrakirti. He says, compassion is like the seed for harvest. You have to have a seed to have the crops grow in the first place. And then in the middle, you need water. You need to keep putting water on the seed and on the little sprouts as they're growing. If they don't get water, they won't be able to reach maturity. So all along the way, you need water. So compassion is also like that. And then at the end, when you have the actual harvest, the crops are growing and they can be harvested and made into food. So compassion is like all of those. It's like important at the beginning, like the seed. It's important in the middle, like the water, and important at the end, like the mature crops, the harvest. Then, I guess this is a Kadampa master, Shang Nachung Tumpa, said, Although I asked the elder refers to Atisha, I asked him for instructions, nothing more came of it than let go of your worldly thoughts, cultivate bodhicitta. That sounds like he was disappointed that that's all Atisha said. Geshe Dromdumpa laughed at him and said, you got the central point of the elder's instructions. He knew the key point of the teachings, the Dharma. So we don't really need more than that. Well, of course we do, but anyway, that was like the pith instructions of Atisha. Let go of worldly thoughts and cultivate bodhicitta. So if we could do that, we'd be doing really well. There's a lot of work to do right there. Then he says, since it is difficult to gain certainty about this, you must gather the accumulations and purify again and again, study the scriptures such as the marvelous Array Sutra, isn't that the Gandhavya Sutra? As well as their commentaries, and seek firm certainty. It is, as the glorious Ashvaghosha says, referring to the Buddha, your mind, heroic one, is precious, the seed of complete enlightenment. Only you know it as the essence. Other beings do not guess that. So I think what that is saying is, in your mind, Buddha, you have this bodhicitta, this precious mind of complete enlightenment, and you know that as the essence of the path. So we need to accumulate merit and purify in order to gain certainty about the importance of compassion. Just in case we don't have certainty, but we might have doubt, it's possible. Some people may doubt that great compassion is that important, but if we purify our mind of afflictions and karma, and if we accumulate positive energy by making offerings and so on, then doubts will clear away and we'll gain more certainty. And also the importance of studying scriptures like the sutras and their commentaries. Okay, so that is the first point, the way compassion is the root of the Mahayana. Then the second point, B, is the way the other causes and effects become causes and effects of that compassion. So I think I made another slide for that. That has, I just thought to put up the actual 7 points of this method. For those who may not, I'm sure most people have heard them many times, but the first is seeing all beings as having been our mother, then remembering their kindness, then wishing to repay their kindness, then love and compassion, the extraordinary attitude, and bodhicitta. So those are the 7 points that we need to reflect on, meditate on, not just once or twice, but again and again and again. And by doing so, we will be able to achieve bodhicitta. Bodhicitta will be naturally arising and spontaneous in our mind. So as I mentioned, go back, one way of explaining how these are cause and effect is that the first 6 are causes and number 7 is the effect. So if we meditate on the first 6 one by one, then bodhicitta will pop up in our mind. We'll gain the realization of bodhicitta. But now Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining a somewhat different way. I don't think that's contradictory. I think it's just 2 different ways of explaining how these are cause and effect. So the next you can go to the next slide. Yeah, the other way is here. The way the other causes and effects become causes and effects of that compassion, and that has 2 points. First is the way 4 of the Sevenfold Instructions, from understanding as mothers through love. Those are the first 4 points. So those are causes of compassion. Okay, so if we meditate on the first 4 points, then compassion will arise, because that's so important. He's just pointed out how, compassion is necessary in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. So that is really the root. What term he used? The root of the Mahayana, great compassion. So by meditating on the first 4 steps, we'll be able to generate great compassion. And then he says the way extraordinary attitude and bodhicitta are effects of compassion. So the last 2, so compassion is number 5. So the first 4 are causes of compassion, which is number 5. And then the last 2, extraordinary attitude and bodhicitta, those are effects of compassion. Yeah? So the first 4 causes of compassion, and then compassion itself is the cause of the last 2. Yeah, just a different way of explaining, but both are valid. Okay, so first, the way 4 of the Sevenfold Instructions, from understanding as mothers through love, are causes. Okay, so if you reflect again and again on the suffering of a sentient being, this will generally give rise to the mere wish that it be free from suffering. However, for this mind to arise easily and for it to arise very strong and stable, its object must first be a sentient being who has the aspect of being likable and valuable. Okay, so if we just meditate on the suffering of some sentient being, some animal out there in the forest or some person in Newport, we'll be able to feel the wish for that being to be free of suffering. But we need that to be strong and stable. And so we have to be able to feel that that sentient being is somehow dear and precious, likable and valuable. So he says, when someone close to us meets with suffering, we cannot bear it. Okay, so if there's someone we really love, we really care about, like a family member, a friend, a member of the community, someone we're already very close to, we have really good, fond feelings for. So when that person is experiencing suffering, we can't bear it. We're just like, oh, I have to do something. I have to help them. And he says, when our enemies we meet with suffering, we enjoy it. Is that true? Come on, be honest. I mean, I don't like to admit it, but, even though outside, you, oh, how sad, oh, how unfortunate, but deep down inside. At least sometimes, okay. We do need to, be honest if we have those kind of thoughts and feelings, because if they're there and we don't recognize them and acknowledge them, then they won't go away. We need to work on those. And I was thinking about executions, when a prisoner, there are numerous states in our country that still have capital punishment, and so when there's an inmate that's been condemned, is that the word? Condemned to die, and they actually carry it out. There's often lots of people outside the prison, and they cheer, the moment that person has been executed. It's like rejoicing, so happy. Yeah? What happens? And other people watching the news or whatever also feel happy. So that's, yeah, really, really sad. But that's human nature. That's how human beings are. You know, in medieval times, you'd hear about these public executions that would happen in the town square. And lots of people would come to watch, you know, the head being cut off or chopped to pieces or whatever. And it was like entertainment. And also here in this country, the lynchings, right? Yeah? Oh my God, that was sick. There would even be people taking photos and making postcards, and then people buy these postcards and send them to their friends. You know, look what I saw today. Look at the entertainment that happened in our town. My goodness. Yeah, human beings. Really sick. Anyway, so, yeah, I mean, if Lama Tsongkhapa is saying this, maybe he experienced it too. He saw it in his own mind that, yeah, if we have an enemy, someone we don't like, even if they haven't harmed me or my friends or my loved ones, but they've just done really awful things, then we may have this feeling they should suffer, and we rejoice if they suffer. So that's opposite of compassion. We have to be aware of that and overcome that. Then the third possibility, he says, when someone who is neither a friend nor an enemy meets with suffering, mainly a neglectful equanimity arises. So we feel just a sort of indifference. Not necessarily, I don't know, you know, if you see, you know, visually, you see somebody suffering, even if it's a total stranger, you don't know that person at all, then you probably feel some concern, but not the same as if you really know that person, if that person is someone you know and love and care about. And again, there's lots of stories about, you know, somebody being mugged in New York City. People just walk by and don't do anything. So there's that kind of attitude too. Okay. So in this regard, since our mind finds the first ones are likable, the more we cherish them, the more their suffering becomes unbearable to us, and the more compassion arises for them. If we cherish them a little or moderately, our inability to bear their suffering will also be relatively small. But if we cherish someone very much, we find it unbearable when that person meets with only minor suffering. When we see our enemies suffering, not only does the wish that they be free of suffering fail to arise, but also the thought occurs to us, may their suffering increase and may they not be free from it. That's pretty bad, really bad. That is our reaction to someone we find unlikable. Moreover, our joy at their suffering will also be greater or smaller depending on how much aversion they induce in us. Yeah, so if we just dislike someone a little bit, then, you know, our kind of happiness at their suffering will be a little bit. But if we really deeply hate someone, like if someone has really caused us a great deal of suffering, then, you know, the greater the joy we will have when they are suffering. With respect to the suffering of those who are neither friend nor enemy, we find it neither unbearable nor enjoyable. That is our reaction when someone is neither likable nor unlikable. Given this is so, meditating on sentient beings as our relatives is to make them attractive to us. Okay, so if what he just explained makes sense, if we have this feeling of cherishing a person, finding them really dear and valuable and important, then when they are suffering, when we become aware of their suffering, then we'll find it unbearable, and we'll just be, just have this really strong compassion to help them. And so that's why, like the first point in the method for developing bodhicitta is to see all beings as mothers. Since our closest relation is our mother, others are established as dear and likable to us through meditating on them as having been our mother, and then remembering their kindness and wishing to repay this kindness. The effect of these 3 steps is a love that cherishes sentient beings like one's only child. They produce compassion. So that's the reason for this meditation on all beings as having been our mother. And I have to confess that in the beginning, when I first heard these teachings, I thought it was really beautiful, but I also wondered, did the Tibetans just make this up? So I was very happy to find the sutra source for this, and Bhikkhu Bodhi helped me to do this. So this is in the Pali Canon, in the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's called the Mata Sutra. Mata meaning mother, so the Mother Sutra. So the Buddha said, Bhikshus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. It is not easy, bhikshus, to find a being who in this long course has not previously been your mother. And then he said the same with father, brother, sister, son, daughter. So these are the words of the Buddha. The Buddha did say this. And yeah. And he doesn't actually say every single being has been your mother, but he says it's not easy to find someone. And, we would say, well, the Buddha is omniscient. Buddha sees everything that exists. There's nothing that's hidden to the Buddha. Nothing that exists that the Buddha can't see. And so if the Buddha can't find somebody, some being that hasn't been our mother, that's pretty much saying, yeah, there isn't anyone who hasn't been your mother. So there's actually in this part, this section of the Samyutta Nikaya, there's this is just a really short sutra, and there's a number of these, and they all start pretty much the same, with saying that samsara is without discoverable beginning, and there's a first point, and so on and so forth. So he starts off like that, and then says something else. So this is also the source of this notion of beginningless time. I also had difficulty with that. I think many people do, but this is what the Buddha said. Yeah, we cannot find the beginning to samsara. We can't find the beginning to sentient beings roaming and wandering, being born, dying, again born, dying, and so on and so on. So we can't find the beginning of this all. And all along, we've been hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. So I wonder, I hear there's a lot of Western people who consider themselves Buddhists, but they don't believe in rebirth. They don't accept rebirth. So I really wonder, what do they make of this? This is just one of many, many places in the canon where the Buddha spoke about reincarnation. Maybe they just say, oh, this wasn't really spoken by the Buddha. This was added later by other people. I don't know. I find it kind of astounding that people are really familiar with what the Buddha taught, that they can not accept rebirth. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside. But so the Buddha did say that every being has been our mother as well as father and so on. But they mainly, in this method for developing bodhicitta, they mainly focus on mother, because she really is the most important person in our life. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have a mother, right? So our whole life is we owe to our mother. Of course, we needed a father too. We needed the sperm from the father, but it's mainly the mother, because she's the one who carries. The only way for a human body to come into existence is in the womb of a female. You can have fertilized eggs in a laboratory, but they're not going to grow into a human being. It has to be in the womb. So the womb of a mother has all the conditions for a human body to come about. And even if that's all that our mother did, even if she just gave birth to us and then left us in a garbage can somewhere and we were brought up by somebody else, still, that is important. We still owe our life to her. Yeah. So, yeah. But most mothers, I think, don't do that. Most mothers really love their children and cherish them and take such good care of them. I mean, it's amazing to watch mothers. I haven't been a mother myself, but watching mothers and what they do for their children is just mind-blowing. And yeah, so that's the reason for focusing on that particular relationship of mother and child. And also we don't remember being a baby and being looked after by our mother, right? Our memories start later, when we're already running around, falling downstairs and so on. Yeah, so that early part of our life, when we were just like totally dependent on our mother, that's the time when her kindness was really particularly strong. And so, yeah, this meditation, I just love this meditation. And I remember when I first started learning, I was going to the Tibetan library in Dharamsala and listening to Geshe Ngawang Dargay teach the Lamrim. And he taught this, he went into great detail with that particular meditation. And I was just like, I mean, I never thought of those things before, right? And instead, I just thought of all the things my mom did that I didn't like. So I had a lot of anger and resentment towards my mother. And I was like, oh my God, she did that, and she did And I remember after class going out into the woods and just crying my eyes out. It was like, wow. And yeah, a lot of people have that experience. It's like things we don't remember, and maybe we never thought about. So it's so easy to ignore those things. You just take it for granted. Well, that's what mothers do. Of course she did those things. But to actually think about, contemplate those things is just a really heart-opening. So it's beautiful, beautiful meditation. And then that leads to the second point, which is, well, actually the first point. Yeah, the first point is thinking that everybody has been our mother. And then the second point is actually thinking about the kindness, what a mother does. So what we have received from all of these mothers, then that kind of naturally leads to the third point, which is repaying their kindness. I mean, when we can really get in touch with the kindness we have received from our mother or any person, then naturally we feel grateful and appreciative, and we want to be kind to them in return. So those are the first three steps, and then that naturally gives rise to love, the fourth point, love that cherishes sentient beings like one's only child. So, yeah, if we really do those first three steps well, then that will lead to a feeling of love. but we also need to continue working on that love, cultivating it more and more. And then the result of those four is compassion. Then he says, with respect to compassion and the love that wishes that others meet with happiness, there does not seem to be any certainty as to which one is the cause and which one is the effect. So it seems that, yeah, it's not definite, the sequence of those, and perhaps it's a case of individual personalities and dispositions. You know, for some people, it might be easier to cultivate love and then compassion, and for other people, it might be easier to cultivate compassion and then love. So, seems to be no fixed order for those, but we definitely do have to meditate on both of them. And then he says, these meditations on sentient beings as our relatives have been explained by the Master Chandrakirti, the Venerable Chandragoman, and the Master Kamalashila as the cause for bodhicitta to arise. Okay, so that is how 4 of the 7 points are causes. Then the way extraordinary attitude and bodhicitta are the effects. Well, I think it means effects of compassion. It should be sufficient to say that compassion arises based on such a gradual training of the mind and the desire to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings arises after that. Why is the extraordinary attitude inserted between them? Okay, so maybe this will help with Venerable Pema's question. So why do we need that extraordinary attitude? The extraordinary attitude is usually explained as just taking on the responsibility. I myself will do whatever it takes to free all sentient beings from suffering and ensure that they have every possible kind of happiness. So why is that there if we already have love and compassion? Okay, so Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas also have immeasurable compassion and the love that thinks, if only sentient beings were to meet with happiness and if only they were free from suffering. So those following those 2 paths, wanting to attain their own nirvana, they also have that kind of compassion and love. Yet those who are not Mahayanists do not take on the responsibility to accomplish happiness and eliminate suffering for every sentient being. And therefore, it is necessary to generate the extraordinary attitude, which is the special attitude of those with brave hearts. This is understood from a quotation from the Questions of Sagaramati Sutra and the commentary on the Sublime Continuum. So there was a quotation in the back. In this passage, the Buddha contrasts the response of those who merely grieve and lament when a beloved son falls into a pit of filth to one who actually jumps in to save him. The commentary in question is likely that of a Sangha. So, yeah, I think the story is if a little child falls into a pit of filth, like a cesspool, and some people will be upset and, concerned about this little child, but won't jump in to save the child. But the parent, one who's actually the parent of this child, will jump in, will not be concerned at all about jumping into this cesspool, no matter how filthy and smelly it is, in order to save their child. So they say that's, the difference between like a bodhisattva and someone following the path to their own liberation. Bodhisattva is willing to jump in and, as we saw before, continue taking birth in samsara, life after life after life, in order to help all sentient beings. Even hell, willing to go to hell, willing to go to the hungry ghost realm. They don't want to just live in a nice, cushy place, but, even the most horrific, horrible environments, to save the sentient beings who are there. And some bodhisattvas have that kind of attitude of being willing to jump in and do anything and everything to save even just one sentient being. And those hearers and solitary realizers don't have that attitude. They want to get out of samsara. So that's their goal. After the mind to free sentient beings has arisen in this manner, you are still unable to complete even the welfare of one sentient being owing to your current situation. So even if we do have this thought, I want to reach enlightenment and help all sentient beings get out of samsara and, get perfect happiness, but realistically, can we do that? Yeah, can we even help one sentient being, even ourselves, right? Even this one here, can we get this one out of samsara? Not only that, even if you were to attain the states of the two kinds of arhats, the hearer and solitary realizer arhats, you would only be able to complete the welfare of very few beings. So, those who reach the state of arhat, while they're still in their body, they're still in their life, they do work for the benefit of sentient beings and are able to help sentient beings. But he says you would only be able to complete the welfare of very few beings, and their welfare would be merely to accomplish liberation. So the most you could do to help sentient beings would be to bring them to the state you have achieved, which is the state of arhat, the state of nirvana, freedom from samsara. You wouldn't be able to help them go all the way to Buddhahood because you haven't gotten there yourself. You haven't done everything it takes to reach Buddhahood yourself. So you would not be able to guide other beings to that state. I mean, that's still wonderful. That's still fantastic if you can help sentient beings reach nirvana. But he says, but then they cannot establish them in omniscience. So an arhat would not be able to help anyone attain omniscience. So who can complete the temporary and final welfare of limitless beings? If you reflect in this vein, you will come to understand that only a Buddha is able to do this. And you will generate the wish to attain Buddhahood for the welfare of sentient beings. Okay, so it's only if we ourselves become a Buddha, become like fully enlightened, fully omniscient with all the qualities and the abilities, the skills of a Buddha. Only if we are in that state will we be able to really help all sentient beings, not just get out of samsara, but also develop their full potential for enlightenment. So that's how we come to, generate the wish to attain Buddhahood. So we got 10 minutes. Should I continue, or are there any questions?
This is more, I guess, checking an explicit clarification. But so an arhat, once they have left their body, and they are said to be only in that state of complacent peace. So even if they have the capacity with the mind that they have to generate emanations that could be of benefit. They don't have that at all. So, but they realize, I mean, so, okay, so that's one thing. But even if they had that capacity, because they don't have bodhicitta, they wouldn't. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, so what they say, and this is explained in the Ornament for Clear Realization, that when, like a hero or a solitary realizer, when they achieve their final goal, which is the state of nirvana, arhat, so if they do that while they're in their, like in the human life, they have this human body, so they have a human body, but their mind is in nirvana. And so they may live for a certain number of years, and while they're alive, they will probably benefit people, benefit sentient beings. And then when they pass away, when death happens, then their mind separates from this body, and it said they're born in a lotus in Sukhavati, Pure Land. I mean, I don't know if born is the right word, but anyway, that's where they end up. They end up in a lotus in Sukhavati. And they sit there just meditating in this state of peace and bliss, because there's no more afflictions. They've completely eliminated all the afflictions in their mind. And so there's nothing to disturb their mind, and it's just a really blissful state. And they stay there for a long time. I've never heard any, I mean, I guess it's possible that someone who's following that path might develop abilities like being able to emanate. Yeah, they probably do have those abilities, but I don't think they would, I don't know if they're able to do that while their mind is in that state of bliss of nirvana.
Well, actually, just as you were describing that, I was thinking if their mind is in that bliss of nirvana because they don't have the capacity to know conventional truth, they wouldn't have anything arise in their mind to direct them toward another being.
I guess so, yeah. Their mind would just be absorbed in like single-pointed concentration on emptiness, yeah, and that's all they want. I mean, that was what they aimed for, and that's what they have, and so I guess they're just totally content to remain in that state. Whereas, on the Bodhisattva path, we train all along to have both method and wisdom, not just the wisdom side, but the method side, which is bodhicitta and giving and ethics and patience and so on. So bodhisattvas are training all along to combine those two. And yeah, just this thought of helping sentient beings, that's the most important thing, not your own happiness, your own peace, your own bliss, but helping sentient beings. So that's been their training all along. So they don't, I mean, they do say, I remember in the ornament, I think, it sounds kind of funny, but they say that, so the bodhisattva has 10 grounds, and when they reach the 8th ground, by the 8th ground, they are at the same level as an arhat, because they have eliminated all the afflictions. They know they have no more afflictions in their mind, and they just have the obscurations to omniscience that they have to clear away. And it's, I think, if I remember correctly, it's kind of funny. They say that, the Buddhas have to kind of continue urging them at that point, because they could easily, even at that point, even after all that time of acquaintance with bodhicitta and the welfare of sentient beings, it's, they could easily slip into that piece of bliss and just get stuck there. So I thought, how is that possible? But I guess that bliss is just so profound. I mean, just beyond our imagination. Like, no more anger, no more any affliction, even the slightest, subtlest affliction, never arising in the mind, just the peace of that, the bliss of that. So, yeah. So why did I say that? Yeah, that, I guess that makes it, huh? Yeah. So yeah, I think that's how it is for the arhats. They never intended to do anything other than go into nirvana and remain there. Venerable Leslie.
With the case of the Bodhisattva on the 8th ground, though, they haven't lost their bodhicitta because of that. They just don't want to, they just go into a meditation that they don't necessarily have any feeling to come back out of.
It's not complete. It wasn't really clear, and I remember we were all kind of like, huh? Astonished that that could still happen to such a high level.
But if they were to see a sentient being, bodhicitta would still arise, but they're not seeing conventionality when they're in their meditations.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. It's been many years since we studied that, but there are these passages in the scriptures about that. It's like, yeah, but the Buddhists still need to sort of, nudge them, urge them, keep going, you're not finished yet. Maybe like a long distance runner, they're almost to the finish line, but they think, oh, how much longer? Yeah, keep going, you're almost there.
I had this qualm about this quote that's, every time I read this quote, I was wondering, have you received any explanation from like Bhikkhu Bodhi? Because it says samsara is without discoverable beginning, so it has no beginning, it's quite straight. But then when it talks about the beings, it says it's not easy to find a being, so it does not definitively that there is no such being. Have you any explanation of like this? Is this like the qualification seems to be different?
Yeah, well, I don't know why the Buddha said those words in that way, and I don't know how a Theravada, I could ask Bhikkhu Bodhi, but yeah, how a Theravada would interpret it. But I was giving what I thought would be the Mahayana interpretation, which is the Buddha is omniscient. Buddha knows everything that exists. There's nothing that exists that isn't known by the Buddha. So if the Buddha says that, what it means is there isn't a being who hasn't been your mother. So why the Buddha said it in this way, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of statements where the Buddha would say something in a puzzling way, and we might think, why did he say it like that and not like that? Well, I mean, it's difficult to know. So I don't know. I can't answer that. Some questions over here.
I've always really appreciated that phrasing because from like a mathematical analysis point of view, there are different sizes of infinity. And there is the infinite past lives we have had, and then there is the infinite number of sentient beings that exist. And so the question of which infinity is bigger, like from a mathematical point of view, that's a valid question. And so that idea of it's not, if he would say every single sentient being has been your mother, then that would be asserting which of those infinities is bigger. So some of these things where it's kind of said in a what might seem like an ambiguous way, I think actually makes a lot of sense from a mathematical point of view. So.
If he was trained in mathematics, I don't know.
Well, I'm just getting a little reality check here, the importance of compassion at the beginning. If your mind is moved by great compassion, you will certainly resolve to free sentient beings from cyclic existence. But it's not going to be very strong. Then you have to take the responsibility. So I'm looking at even in the beginning, even to say in the beginning, is that great compassion, at least in my mind, is extremely contrived. To get to where you are moved by great compassion, to take that responsibility inside your mind at the beginning of the path is not where I am. Just like bodhicitta, I have to make it up and imagine it. The same thing, to have that kind of resolve that I am willing to take responsibility at the beginning of the path you're in the beginning of the path for a really, really long time to be able to generate even that level of depth of fearlessness around that resolve. I mean, I love the thought, but it's not.
I mean, he doesn't really define what he means by beginning.
Right.
Where is the beginning?
It's not like, hi, I'd like to know the Dharma. Nice to meet you. You are, what's your name? You know, not that beginning. So.
But I think, like many of us are still very much beginners, even after many years of learning. But I think, when we start learning the Dharma, people often feel, once they learn about the different vehicles, the different paths that they could follow, a lot of people will feel inclined towards the Mahayana, yeah. And other people feel more drawn to the Theravada for different reasons, so.
But I find that to be a very good antidote to thinking that somehow by this time there should be some sort of mind that resembles great compassion. I mean, it's a similitude as far as I'm in my mind.
Yeah.
So I have to be, and that helps me. I don't, once again, the expectations are more doable, more tenable, because the beginning could be for a few countless great eons even before getting to the path of accumulation. So
yeah.
I don't, I just fend off unrealistic expectations of actually being moved by it to the point where I would set that resolve without question.
Yeah.
And that's totally cool for me. I mean, I'm fine.
Kind of along those lines, I sometimes get hung up on taking responsibility for others when I realize I'm still trying to tease apart what I'm responsible for with this very confused mind. And I'm learning I don't need to take responsibility for a lot of other people's feelings and things. So I know sometimes this can be a big challenge in my mind of what I'm responsible for.
Well, I think the word here, the word responsibility, when they talk about the bodhisattvas taking the responsibility, what that means is, I think of it like parents, when parents bring a child into the world, it's just kind of understood that they are responsible for that child, not their neighbors, not the police. It's the parents who are responsible to make sure the child has food and clothes and medicine and everything else they need and is taken care of and kept safe and so on. So that sense of responsibility. So I think a bodhisattva cultivates, or someone aspiring to the bodhisattva path cultivates that responsibility that it doesn't mean I am responsible for every thought and every action that everybody does. No, they are responsible for that. But I will take on the responsibility of leading them and guiding them until they are free of samsara and until they have reached enlightenment. So, I mean, a Buddha knows. There's this famous quotation from the Lotus Sutra where Buddha says a Buddha cannot wash away sentient beings' suffering and delusions with water. They cannot extract their suffering like pulling out a thorn. They can't insert their realizations into the minds of others, but how they teach or how they help is by teaching the Dharma. So, it would be deluded to think we can go into anyone's mind and fix their mind and, throw out the afflictions and, cause them to have realizations. That's not possible. So, yeah, we have to understand realistically what we can do to help others, how we can help others, and not have unrealistic expectations. So it's mainly by teaching them the Dharma and guiding them on the path. So I think we better stop. Yeah. Okay, so we'll continue next week. We'll go into the actual training, the 7-point cause and effect. So let's dedicate the merit, the positive energy, that it will bring happiness and peace, liberation and enlightenment to all sentient beings.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniriyakayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of true Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.